Moving props with points is really simple, which is good since it's the bread and butter of precision alignment. So I'll try tackling that problem, that example that I gave right at the start, so moving two plates together. And what I want to happen is for this edge of the first plate to move up and line up with this edge of the second plate. So to define this problem in terms of points, all I have to do is say I want this corner to move to that corner. So I'll select precision alignment and bring up the tool menu. I've got point hit bar selected, that's what I want, and all the default settings are just fine, and point 1 selected here. So I place point 1 in the top right corner of the left plate and point 2 in the other corner of the other plate. I select the prop that I want to move. In PA, whichever prop that you have selected is always the one that moves, and in general you can only ever move one prop at a time. And you'll see that this button here, move entity, comes alive since I have a prop selected. And this is where the secondary selection becomes important. So I want to move the prop from point 1 to point 2, so along that vector. So I select point 1 in the primary and point 2 in the secondary. And here it'll give you a little reminder in the balloon saying move from primary to secondary, and I just click and it moves in place. And since the constructs are attached to the plates, I can move the plates away to whatever position I want. And if I click move entity again, it'll still move into place. And another concept that's really important to get with PA is that rotation and movement are treated completely separately. So if I rotate this plate to whatever angle I want and click move entity, they'll still move together. And this becomes really important later on when you start doing more advanced functions. You'll start finding that the hard part isn't so much moving the props, it's setting up the constructs correctly. So once you've set up the constructs, the movement becomes extremely simple. So you can redo things, undo them really rapidly. Another important thing to note when moving with points is that the movement is relative to the positions of the points. It doesn't care about the props. So in this case we're moving along this vector from point 1 to point 2. If I were to place point 2 on the same plate, on this plate here, and I want to move from point 1 to point 2, that means that this plate will move along this vector, so exactly the distance from there to there. So if I keep my eye on point 2 and press move entity, you'll see how it changes to point 1, and the plate has moved exactly one plate's width along that direction. And likewise, I don't have to select the same prop that I have the constructs on. I can select any old prop, so it doesn't even have to be a plate. I'll spawn this and move it, and there we go. It's moved along this direction from point 1 to point 2, and since I have these constructs attached to this plate, the movement direction is also affected by the rotation of this plate. So if I line it up in that direction and then press move entity, it moves along that line. And this is really useful. So for example, if I want a prop to move exactly 1 phx distance in any direction, I can set this up. So I'll put point 3 on here as well. And okay, so I can move this prop. I can move it sideways. I can also move it down just by selecting different points here. So I select point 1 and point 3 and it moves down. And another important thing is that the order that you select these in will determine the direction that the prop will move. So if I select it the other way round, point 3 to point 1, you'll see that it moves upwards. So it's all very versatile, and that's the whole idea. You can use precision alignment any number of ways that you want once you've grasped these basics. So once you've got these basics down, you can do pretty much anything in terms of movement. So that's the whole idea there. And I'll just clean everything up. There we go. And the last thing I want to show you is precision alignment shortcuts. So pretty much doing the same thing we were doing before, but going to be faster. So I'll bring up PA. And the first one I want to show you is shift left click. So I just hold down shift and that places consecutive constructs. So rather than having to click through each of these in turn, it'll place them consecutively. So that doesn't just affect points, it affects lines as well. I can show you with that. And it's just a quick way of placing them. So I'll show that on a prop and you'll quickly learn how useful that is. Okay. Okay, so I just hold down Shift, left click and left click, and I select the prop with right click and move. And notice, because of the way I did things, I have point 2 selected in the primary list and point 1 in the secondary list. So I'm moving from point 2 to point 1. And I'll show you how that affects things when I'm moving the plates together. So watch the order I do things in. I click on the point I want to move to first, then I hold down Shift and click on the point I'm moving from, then right click and move entity. And it's very simple, very straightforward. And that's the fast way of doing things. I'll show you one more time. Left click, Shift, left click, right click, and move entity. And there we go. And that all just arises from the shortcuts and the way that this all works. The next one I want to show you is a shortcut for attachments. So say I want to place a point and not have it attached to anything. I make sure I have nothing selected by right clicking on the ground, then I hold down Alt and left click. So Alt left click, and that will auto attach points to whatever I have selected. So if I want these points to be attached to that plate, I select that plate, I hold down Alt and left click, and there we go. And you can see the blue line attaching it to that plate. So that's another way of attaching things very quickly, and it has pretty much the same effect as this attach button here. It's just a bit faster. The next shortcut I want to show you is pretty interesting. It's nothing new. I'll just move this plate again. And if I want to repeat the last thing that I've done, so the last thing I did was move that plate, I simply hold down Shift and right click on the plate. And that'll move it again. And it doesn't matter which direction I have this in, it always moves. Rather than taking these points into account, it simply takes the last movement into account. So I can still rotate this, and then if I shift click on it, it'll move in the same direction it moved before. And I can do the same on other props, so I can shift click on this, shift right click, and it'll move in the same direction. So that's the third shortcut I want to show you. So that's Shift left click for placing consecutive constructs, Alt left click for auto attaching constructs, Shift right click to repeat the last function, and the last one I'll show you is stack moving. This is pretty interesting. So I'll hold down Shift and click move entity, and you'll see what happens. And there we go. So holding Shift and left clicking on any move button in precision alignment, that's any button that has move entity or rotate entity on it, will repeat that function and leave stacked entities behind. So I'll undo that again. And this time I'll shift right click to repeat the last function. And you'll see that it stack moves. Now the number of stacks here that happens is affected by a little menu that will show up. If I hold down Alt and click on a move entity button, it shows me this little stack dialog, and I can determine whether I want them all no collided with each other, and I can also determine the stack amount. So say I want them to only stack once, I can right click on this, hold down Shift, move entity, and there we go, it's stacked once. So it's all very simple stuff, but it again adds to the versatility, and it makes everything a bit faster and more slick. So that just about wraps up this first tutorial. Sorry, it's a bit longer than I expected. But we've covered probably about 10, maybe 15% of what precision alignment has to offer. There's a lot of depth to it, but what we've covered so far is the basics, and these are the most important parts. So once you've learned everything that I've shown in this video, you're pretty well set to start using the rest of it. I'll be covering them in later tutorials in more depth, but for now just use what I've shown you in this video. You'll find it pretty useful, I hope. And I will see you in the next couple of videos where I'll hopefully be going more into depth of the manipulation panel, different kinds of constructs, and I'll start going into functions where you'll start to see some of the real power of precision alignment and the construct system. So if you want details on what you've seen in this video so far, and any further details on the rest of precision alignment and the tools, check out the project wiki. It's all in the descriptions section of this video. And this is Wenley, and I'll see you next tutorial.